Third Prince Zhang Lei has one of the most fascinating and crazy powerful guardian spirit beasts in the entire succession contest, a power that, with the right planning, makes him nigh on unstoppable. However, this ability is reliant on time, and time is the one thing that Zhang Lei is rapidly running out of at the moment, as he is now being hunted by every controlling faction on every tier of the Black Whale 1. So before we properly jump into whatever it is we're talking about here, in the fan base there is some confusion with Zhang Lei's name, and you'll often hear people call him Chodai, and people do this for reasons. Chodai is the Japanese reading of the Chinese characters that make up the name Zhang Lei, which is directly taken from Chinese investor and philanthropist Zhang Lei, with our third prince being modeled directly after him, and this inspiration is an integral aspect of his character, which is why the decision was made in English to use the real-life name rather than the Japanese reading of the Chinese characters. Although I would note this is not consistent across translations. In French, for example, they stick with Chodai, and fair enough, as when the succession contest does eventually become an anime, you will be hearing characters call him Chodai instead of Zhang Lei. But Zhang Lei is a character based on the concept of currency and what we do with currency, with Zhang Lei himself, personality-wise, being like a living coin. There are always two sides to anything involving Zhang Lei, with Shimano describing him as follows. He is tolerant enough to talk on the phone, but he is too proud to stay on hold. He would prefer to avoid bloodshed, but he would not hesitate either. He is both kind and cruel. If we can humor him without offending him, he would not target us, at least not until the numbers have dwindled. And Zhang Lei very much agrees with this coin assessment and has described his ideal vision of a king as someone who makes full use of both the light and dark sides of society. That is Zhang Lei. He lives in the light and in the dark simultaneously. In public, he is the benevolent prince, and in private, he is the benefactor of a human trafficking mafia family. And so it should come as no surprise that his guardian spirit beast takes the form of a coin-shaped object, specifically a Dharma Chakra, whose cryptic ability involves spitting out a single numbered coin per day. This guardian spirit beast, it produces currency. And as Kurapika points out, the purpose of currency is to be used. Used for what, you say? Well, that is Zhang Lei's problem. Zhang Lei happens to be in one of the worst possible positions in the succession contest. As the third prince, he is already automatically one of the biggest targets, but unlike the first and second prince, Zhang Lei had no idea that Nen even existed prior to the contest. So he is competing without the necessary knowledge to defend his own position. It's like walking into a biology exam only to realize it's a maths exam, but you didn't take maths, and also all of the questions as well as the paper the questions are printed on are invisible. So Zhang Lei, I think understandably, gets rather frustrated by Nen and refers to it as hocus pocus. And in chapter 403, there's this great scene where Zhang Lei and 7 of his finest guards are just standing there, staring at the 7 Nen coins that his guardian spirit beast has produced, and they're all just completely clueless as to what to do with any of this information. And to be clear, these are not dumb people, and Zhang Lei himself is wildly intelligent. He has surrounded himself with a certain high standard of intellect. But because the world of Nen is so new to all of them, they just don't have the mental tools to adapt quickly enough to survive this contest. And that is why Zhang Lei personally called Kurapika, which other princes would not have done. At the same time, Kurapika also received calls from the first and fifth princes. In the case of the first prince, it was actually Balsamoko Might calling, and in Tebepa's case, it was Mayor calling. But the fact that Zhang Lei made this call himself speaks to his level of dignified desperation. He won't show it, but he's freaking out, man. And he's even said the following: information on Nen could affect the battle for the throne. My guardian spirit beast ability and its effects. I need Kurapika to get through this. And I don't know quite how I can make this clear enough to normal people like me and you. Normal, right? I just described us as normal. No one watching these videos is normal. But a high-ranking prince of the Kakin Empire using the word need to describe a lowly bodyguard, that is quite the scandalous admission, and something that infuriates Zhang Lei. In Kurapika's words, it speaks to his royal blood. He can't stand that someone else is in a superior position. But Zhang Lei is at least level-headed enough to understand the situation he's in. Although something I'm honestly not sure about is why Zhang Lei feels that he can only turn to Kurapika, because Zhang Lei happens to be the benefactor of the Jiyu family, which contains at least 3 phenomenal Nen users in Hinri, Zakuro, and Lynch. Or well, just 2 phenomenal Nen users now after Lynch was murdered. And this family have also had other Nen users among them in the past, like Misha, whose post-mortem Nen is still helping them out today, even though she's very dead. And I find it very difficult to believe that the boss of the Jiyu family, Onio Longbao, is unaware of Nen, because it is quite common in the underworld, meaning that Onio may be withholding withholding Nen information from Zhang Lei on purpose. To what end? I don't know. I just find it odd that Zhang Lei is effectively the head of the largest Nen-using mafia in the Empire, and yet he still seems to feel that he has no one else except for Kurapika to talk to about aura use. However, narratively, Kurapika and Zhang Lei are two sides of a coin. Zhang Lei has incredible political power, but no defense against Nen. Meanwhile, Kurapika has incredible Nen power, but no defense against political action, as he is guarding the 14th prince, the very bottom, who may as well not even have any rights or privileges, at least not compared to her 13 older siblings anyway. These two factions at the moment need one another to survive, and it's from this cooperation that we slowly unravel the mystery of Zhang Lei's guardian spirit beast, which produces a single coin every day, but after 10 days, the number on that coin, it compounds. A 1 becomes a 10, and so Zhang Lei's initial hypothesis is as follows. The beast drops a coin every day. I wager it's meaningless for me to hold on to them myself. I expect to see real results once I become king and distribute them to my people. Considering the rate of production, I can't imagine it fulfilling a role as ordinary currency, but perhaps as a medal or reward. But then it wouldn't need to be a Nen ability. It wouldn't be a Nen ability without some extraordinary power. There's nothing to do but sit and wait and see what happens. I have a feeling it could come to affect every single citizen, but it seems insignificant for now, and it doesn't seem remotely useful in this succession battle. It reflects my personality to a sickening degree. Now, why worry more about what happens after I take the throne long before I get there? I bet my spirit beast will exhibit maximum utility after I become king, but to put it another way, I could be an ironclad king as long as I survive. Fine then, I will win the throne on my own. That at the end there was a rather bold statement. It's currently not going very well, but this is where we do get a glimpse of Zhang Lei's frightening intelligence. He doesn't understand Nen at all, however he does have a firm understanding of himself, and he's not deluded enough to overlook his own personal flaws like a lot of princes. I mean, he won't mention them in public, of course, but Zhang Lei is still rather sensible and quite down to earth. But the truth of the ability is that it is based on the concept of investing. The core of Zhang Lei's guardian spirit beast ability is how to allocate capital, which I know financial asset management generally isn't what people come running to Shonen manga to read about. You're trapped watching this video and you're gonna learn some things whether you like it or not. When Zhang Lei allocates one of these coins, he is making an investment. He is selecting a long-term project to buy into, and as such, he gets punished for pulling out of a project too early, such as when Zhang Lei gives his 10 coin to Kurapika, and once Kurapika takes it, the coin resets its number and becomes a 1. Zhang Lei was being punished for pulling out of an investment too early, which means that to make best use of this ability, Zhang Lei needs to have an incredible long-term vision for the future, because this is not a quick response power. And Kurapika's more detailed hypothesis does make sense of Zhang Lei's initial feelings. Kurapika diagnoses Zhang Lei's guardian spirit beast as having a cumulative conjuration ability, and using the power of maths, Kurapika suggests that the coins that are given to Zhang Lei's subjects will continue to compound until they reach a number that activates the aura nodes of the holder. And once it keeps compounding and another number is reached, it even grants them a Nen ability. And the way that I would describe this is that it is a long but easy way of doing what the Haley family are currently up to. They have a system under Morena where the more people they murder, the higher their levels, and once they reach level 21, they instantly unlock a Nen ability. So that, but a coin holder needs to do nothing, literally nothing. They just have to sit there and continue to hold their coin, which quite accurately reflects the world of investing, because tried and true investing, it is boring. What you do, right, and this isn't financial advice, but you stick your money in an index fund, wait 3 to 4 decades, and bam, you've suddenly made some crazy money with almost no effort. It's not flashy, it's not sexy, it's not something you flex about, it's just commitment to the very effective long game. Zhang Lei's coins, they are slow, but they're reliable. Although I will say that in Zhang Lei's case, thankfully, it's not going to take 3 to 4 decades for his investments to pay off. And Kurapika has quite accurately deciphered the timeline of maturation with these coins. Kurapika's hypothesis is that it will take 6 months for the coin holders' aura nodes to be opened, which is when the coin compounds to a quintillion. And for a Nen ability to manifest, the coin value needs to be 10 to the power of 64. Why that number? That's an amazing question. And as a reward for asking that question, I will give you the amazing answer. With numbers in the Western world and other parts of the world, we hit a point where 10 to the power of 100 is suddenly designated as a Google. But in Japanese, the equivalent of reaching that is 10 to the power of 64, which is known as a fukushiki, a word literally meaning unthinkable, unimaginable and inconceivable, which is actually a word taken from Buddhism used to describe concepts that are beyond the comprehension of the pre-enlightened, which is of course connected to Zhanglei's guardian spirit beast being shaped like the Buddhist Dhamma-chakra, which is often pictured adorned with the flowers that appear on Zhanglei's coins. But in order to reach this Fukushigi number, a subject would need to hold on to a coin for 640 days, so just under 2 years, which seems like a long time. But consider that it takes the vast majority of Nen users so much longer than that to even master the basic principles of Nen. We're not talking about abilities, we're talking about, can you do a 10? Can you do a Ren? That stuff takes people years. Don't look at characters like Gon, Killua, and Kurapika and assume that they are normal. Think more of characters like Zushi. Even though Zushi was said to be a very special talent in the Nen world, it is still taking him years to reach a basic level of mastery. But also consider Wing's initial estimate for Gon's progress. He stated that Gon, a 1 in a million Nen talent, would take 5 years to be capable of defeating Guido in Heaven's Arena. So with that in mind, just 2 years without having to do any training whatsoever to achieve that level of mastery, I don't know, it sounds pretty good to me. And should Zhang Lei win the succession contest and start distributing these coins 1 per day, it is going to reach a point where 2 years down the line, he is going to have a new Nen master being created in his kingdom each and every day. And 3 years after that, Zhang Lei will have over 1,000 Nen users at his disposal. Of course, he needs to choose them carefully lest they use their powers against him, but as long as he can, after that time, Zhang Lei would now have almost twice as many Nen users as the entire Hunter Association. And over the coming decades, the Kakin Empire would easily become by far the single most dominant power on the planet. And the best part is that Zhang Lei, he would get there by doing absolutely nothing. Just having a solid plan and committing to the investment from day one. That sounds so ridiculously powerful. However, there is still more to this Guardian Spirit Beast than just that. When Zhang Lei gives the coin to Kurapika, he is making an investment in him. However, Kurapika already knows Nen, which makes us ask the question of how this investment is going to pay off. And Kurapika, he is initially extremely hesitant to even touch the coin being offered by Zhang Lei. And the fact that Zhang Lei was able to logically trap Kurapika into a scenario where he did have to take it is more credit to Zhang Lei's intelligence once more. Kurapika even stated that Zhang Lei wasn't making things easy, and he thought to himself that he was afraid of the coins containing a semi-coercive manipulation ability, one that takes greater and greater command as time passes and as the coin compounds in value, which is a very similar idea to another Guardian Spirit Beast we've already explored, which would be 8th Prince Saleh Saleh's beast. It exhaled smoke that would gradually sway the opinions of whoever breathed it in favor of Saleh Saleh, which is a representation of his toxic lifestyle, and that if you get too close to him, you're going to get swept up in that lifestyle and start to lose your grip on reality. But the logical conclusion here is that if Kurapika were to reach the same milestones that he's identified, then he will become more and more subject to manipulation via Zhang Lei's Guardian Spirit Beast. To put it another way, the more stock that Zhang Lei owns in Kurapika Court, the more he becomes a controlling shareholder of the company. And even if Kurapika doesn't want to, he is now vulnerable to being coercively manipulated by his shareholders. This isn't information that Zhang Lei has given to Kurapika, and one reason why Kurapika didn't tell him about his manipulation concerns is because Kurapika doesn't want to damage his alliance, but he also wants to test his hypothesis through Kaventaba, First Prince Benjamin's bodyguard, who sneakily took the very first coin that popped out on day one without Zhang Lei noticing. And I believe that Zhang Lei still has yet to notice, but Kurapika has noticed. He's a good noticer, and Kurapika is using Kaventaba to assess the effects of a Nen user holding this coin. And from there, Kurapika will then make a decision about what to do with the coin. But for now, he's already kind of coercively being manipulated, because Zhang Lei has, using sheer political status, forced Kurapika to take the coin and to hold on to it at all times. However, the coins also have power even if they aren't handed out. They still compound in Zhang Lei's possession, and that indicates one of two things, which is that either Zhang Lei can use these coins to awaken his own aura use, or that the point is to use their value as some sort of Nen currency with his Guardian Spirit Beast. And that perhaps his Guardian Spirit Beast acts as something of a shop, a Nen shop. But essentially, the longer that Zhang Lei reigns, the richer he becomes, and he has a choice. He can choose to share that wealth with his subjects, have the empire as a whole prosper, or Zhang Lei can hoard this wealth to himself and use his Nen store to buy his way out of any issues that arise. And as for the current status of the coins, Zhang Lei does still command the bulk of their supply. However, Kurapika, as we've explored, has been given 1 coin, while Zhang Lei's bodyguard, 10th Tori, has been given 2 coins, Kaventiba, as we also discussed, has stolen 1 coin, and Zhang has also given a coin to Melody as a show of good faith because he is trying to court her abilities to his side as well. So the coins are pretty cool. One of the more fascinating Nen abilities in Hunter x Hunter, but I think you may have noticed just this is a small problem with them. The same problem that both Kurapika and Zhang have identified, which is that these coins are highly unlikely to be of any real use in the succession contest itself, because there's just not going to be enough time for them to compound into a useful state, leaving Zhang once again essentially defenseless against Nen, and very much relying on Kurapika to help him navigate this world. But that alliance is now at significant risk of being broken, not because of anything that Kurapika or Zhang did, but due to that nasty First Prince Benjamin having successfully initiated special martial law. After discovering this, Zhang immediately fled from his quarters on Tier 1, and he was last reported as being in the Justice Bureau on Tier 2. However, it's also suspected that he's fled even further down in order to seek the protection of the Jiyu family that he is the benefactor of. However, this is extremely dangerous because the Jiyu, they have domain over Tier 4, and that is a long way down. And what Zhang is thinking is that the further he gets away from Benjamin, the safer he is, but he could not be more wrong, as Tiers 3, 4, and 5 are currently being used as the hunting grounds of the Haoli family with their Contagion game. And something that has yet to be relevant in regards to Contagion is that the killing of a Kakian prince is worth a colossal 50 levels. Killing a regular person is worth 1 level, killing a Nen user, that's worth 10 levels, but killing a prince, mate, that is 50 whole levels. You're halfway through to finishing the game just by doing that. And not only that, but Zhang is a gift. He is a prince who can't even defend himself with Nen. So as soon as Zhang left the protection of Tier 1 and the protection of the Justice Bureau on Tier 2, he will no doubt have become the prime target of the Haoli family, because Zhang is now the Hunter x Hunter equivalent of a loot goblin, and I don't think that the Jiyu family are equipped to protect him. And with Tiers 1 and 2 in command of Benjamin, whilst Tiers 3, 4, and 5 are in the domain of the Haoli, there is no longer any safe place on this ship for Zhang meaning that his chances of winning or even surviving the succession contest are now looking rather grim.